Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming, and welcome to the Phi Theta Kappa Honors in Action event. Before we begin, I would like you all to fill out the survey, which I'm pretty sure most of you did. We will be integrating the results from this survey in our research project. I would also invite you all to pick snacks from our table, from the non-GMO and GMO table, and we'll get started. My name is Priscilla Largo. I am the Phi Theta Kappa president of the Honor Society at Westchester Community College. The Honors in Action project allows members to have opportunities to apply learning and practice real-world problem solving by developing an in-depth, action-oriented project related to the research of our Honors in Action topic. Participation in the Honors in Action contributes to personal, academic, and career development and affords students opportunities to have an impact on their campuses and in their communities. The purpose of today's event is to bring awareness of a topic that has been greatly disputed in the recent years but hasn't been examined close enough. Over the past few months, the Phi Theta Kappa team has been researching on genetically modified organisms and the effects they have on the food we consume on a day-to-day basis. And to give you a better understanding, we have here Damar Blanco, our Phi Theta Kappa Vice President of Honors in Action.
Hi, my name is Damar Blanco, and I am co-vice president of Honors in Action with Melissa Lagunas. This year's topic is transformation, and the theme is networks of life. The question focusing on networks of life is, how do relationships among organisms, their environments, and the systems in which they exist transform each other? We decided as a group to discuss GMOs and how they affect people and people who consume them. I would now like to present our special guest, Professor Seid. She is a registered dietitian and nutritionist.
And I also work at the school. I am with the culinary arts and hospitality, nutrition, and dietetics. It's a long name department. I teach in the dietetics program. So today, what I thought with what the presentation is to give you a basic outline of what GMOs are and kind of how did we get here, you know, looking at how agriculture and animal husbandry has functioned over the centuries. So I'm not here to answer any specific question. I'm here maybe to bring more questions or to give you thought, okay? So the question is, growers have been grafting trees. You know what tree grafting is? So if you have 4 varieties of apples in your neighborhood and you want your neighbor's Granny Smith on your Macintosh, you actually take a healthy branch from his tree and you graft it onto yours. So now your tree, which is a Macintosh apple tree, will have Macintosh and will have one nice big branch that's doing Granny Smith. Okay? Or breeding animals, that's called animal husbandry. Or hybrid for plants, cross pollination. So the issue is biotechnology just a modern way of doing these things? And in a way, yes. And in a way, maybe no. So traditional breeding, you wouldn't necessarily mate a pig. You would do a pig with a pig and get a new variety. If some of you, I didn't have any pictures, but it's interesting if you go to Phelps Manor, which is down in I think it's Sleepy Hollow or Tarrytown. That historic site has found the animal husbandry for their sheep and bred them back so that their sheep that they have are very much like sheep were in the 18th century. They look like sheep, but a little different. Okay, but we wouldn't necessarily do a pig and a potato or a pig and a mouse. But even species that seem closely related are not necessarily successful in producing offspring. So the example is a horse and a donkey. The point there was to take the strength of the horse, crossbreed it with a donkey, which is in the same species line, and get an animal that had better endurance and actually is more cost effective for the farmer. And that's exactly what they did. So they got the mule. So you have female mules, you have male mules. The mule cannot reproduce, and that has to do with how many chromosomes. 64 chromosomes in the horse, 62 in the donkey. So now the mule has 64, and while you have gender, they cannot reproduce. So every time you want to increase your mules, you must cross the horse and the donkey. Okay, so they did get a very useful animal. It's more economic, and it has better endurance, and it has pretty much the strength of a horse. So in some ways it was successful, but the thought that they could use mules and still reproduce didn't work. Another example of vegetation is cross pollination. So this is just an orange, and over there, that's in the grapefruit family. That's called a pomelo. So initially, I don't know, I can't say that there aren't GMO tangelos out there, but the original was cross-pollination. And it probably took them several times, meaning several seasons, to successfully get the tangelo. Okay, so this is really, in terms of people who promote biotechnology, is saying really what we're doing is what farmers have done for centuries. We've just crunched our timeline on that a little bit. So by definition, genetic engineering is really, in a way, from some who promote it say it's really similar, others say it's completely different from traditional. And I think that that's true because of the speed with which we see, the different outcomes. So plants and animals and microorganisms, we're really looking very fine-tunedly at DNA, and we're really taking out a specific genome or specific part of the DNA and putting it into another species DNA. They're recombinating it, so to get a desired outcome. So these are the names of the technology. It's called modern biotechnology, gene technology, recombinant DNA technology, or just plain genetic engineering. It's all the same. It's taking a desired trait from one species or one plant and inserting it in the other to get a desired outcome. So it's selecting the genes. So why GMO foods? The original was to be perceived the advantage of either the producer or the consumer. The consumer, by hopefully lowering the price, you can lower the price if you have better yield, better availability. Okay? So a lot of times from the producer's standpoint, they're looking for durability because we know that a lot of our produce really travel pretty far. So we want it to be able to survive the trip. Okay? The objectives are mainly aimed at increased level of crop production, more crop, more profit, hopefully better yield for the general public. Okay? We also want to, from their standpoint, the resistance of diseases and also anything that can help the plant survive an attack by insects or viruses, and actually are tolerant to herbicides. Now, herbicides are frequently used really to kill weeds, but generally they kill the weeds. What's going to happen to the tomato plant or the pepper plant? They're going to be damaged too. So the goal is to create plants that can tolerate these herbicides. So the question comes, we have all of this happening. Okay, we've gone from really a lot relying on local farms to big corporation farms. So how do we ask our government to make sure that things are assessed for safety? There are several steps. The direct health effects on the people, that is really part of what is paramount. Potential to provoke or cause an allergic reaction. So they take that based on the statistics. There's always the possibility somebody might have an allergic reaction because changing the DNA, that is the protein structure, and that's what our bodies react to. Specific components thought to have either nutritional or toxic properties are we at the benefit of increasing production, losing the nutritional value, or are we causing something that might be toxic to ourselves? Those are things that they look for. The stability of the gene, and what this means, does that changed, spliced gene stable, or does it migrate? Does it change? Does it cause other changes not initially anticipated in the plant? Yes. That might be one. It's more, my understanding is really they're looking at terms of the next generation. Okay. So, does the recombination of the genetic material get rotated or out of place? So in a way, what you're saying, yes, but that's what they're looking for. The nutritional effects with genetic modification, is it improving vitamin B, beta carotene, or is it actually reducing it? Those are things that need to be considered as well. Any unintended effect that could result from gene insertion is really that, is it going to cause a change in more of the environment? So the primary concerns are basically three that they really look at, and that is the allergy effect. So this means that the transfer of the genes from something that has an allergic effect would actually cause that response in the general public. So we really, the industry is supposed to be making sure that they're very careful about that. And the protocols for testing genetically modified organisms have been evaluated by the Food and Agricultural Organization, which is part of the United Nations, and also the World Health Organization. These were the two sites that I went to gather talking points for this presentation. So based on their information and their data, there are no allergic effects have been found related to GM foods currently on the international market. Okay, that doesn't mean we say that this is done, it's okay, it's over. We're always looking at that and always should. But because an individual item is not causing an allergic effect, perhaps the combination of 2 or 3 foods in a dish might cause in some people a negative response or an allergic reaction. There is some research out there that is really looking, a lot of our research, we look at rodent research. Some of that absolutely really is applicable to us. Some of it isn't. But the issue is it needs to be replicated. More importantly, we're concerned about gene transfer. So this means you have created new DNA, a new genome, and we want to make sure that it actually stays in place. It doesn't migrate or doesn't cause a recombination, which is, I think, what you were asking for before, right? Does it stay stable? Right. You mean literal with we ate something and the food genome is transferred into our cells? No, this is about within the next, vegetation. Okay. So in other words, GMO foods to cells of the body, yes, it could, but that's because think of how you eat and you break everything down. Does it have a negative effect? They look for that. I'm not, I didn't go to find what the prevalence of that risk factor. Okay, so or really it's really into the bacteria, into the gastrointestinal tract. What would happen if those DNAs came into our body? That's what they look for. And does it cause an adverse effect on the human health? So relevant, if GMO antibiotic resistant genes were to be transferred in some way, there is this possibility, but to date, the data says it's a very low risk. Outcrossing. So this is the migration of genes. This happens probably more of an issue than the gene migration. Is the gene transfer. The migration of genes from GMO to conventional plant in the wild is going to happen because of cross-pollination, just nature in itself, the wind, the rain, runoff. There's always that issue that something can cause a change or a migration in a way to conventional seeds. So the example is, some of you might have seen Food Inc. that was out several years ago, kind of keeps up, and one of the big concerns was what company? Monsanto, okay? So Monsanto took the stand that, these are my seeds. This is my work. This is copyrighted. You're a sustainable farm over here. Well, you know what? We found out that some of our seeds or some of your seeds have some of the DNA from our copyrighted gene from our seeds is a problem. So, there is that possibility. It is out there, as something. So it may have an indirect effect on what we call food safety or food security. That's kind of the concern. Yeah. Well, it might have a negative effect, but the issue is from my standpoint, the way you're asking, way Monsanto sees it. Monsanto sees it predominantly as a financial component, and it is financially, it's their work, and they own the seed. So if they own the seed, you as the farmer in the next plot of land do not have a right to have that seed. However it got on your land, that's technically has been their stand. The other thing is, if you're a farmer and you purchase your seed from a company such as Monsanto, you actually do not have the right to collect the seeds at harvest. It's really from very tightly controlled business perspective. Did I answer your question? Yes, no, kind of. Okay. So GMO crops are, here's a real example, that sometimes the GMO crops that are really being grown for animal feed, particularly we're thinking like corn, or industrial use, that there can be some cross-pollination to products that are meant for us. Statistically, they state that it's a very low levels. Okay, doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Okay, yes. That is, yeah. I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on that, but that is a real reality for sustainable farms, or as you say, the mom and pop farms. It's a battle that goes on back and forth, and it is really a significant concern and problem. So I don't think that there's any real easy answer there, but we do know that the smaller self-sustaining farms don't have the deep pockets that these big corporate farms have. So what is the risk for the environment? Basically, the risk assessment process includes evaluation of characteristics of the GMO. Is it effective? Is it stable? Is it migrating? Is it evolving and changing in a way that wasn't anticipated in the lab? Is that changed in the DNA recombinating and causing a different product down the road. And any unintended effects that could be the result from the insertion of a new gene. So the issue is, even if something comes onto the market, we as consumers should be aware and make our decisions known at the marketplace. Do we want this product or not? And then basically, in this country, go to the legislation and let them know that you have concerns about certain products. We do have a little bit more control, I think, than we think, because legislation sits back and forth. We know that Monsanto has, as one company, I always pick on Monsanto, that they have a lot of control. They actually have some of their former CEOs and CFOs, actually, once they retire, some of them do get government jobs that help make decisions back and forth. But I still think that the general public does have the ability to make change. Issues of concern. These GMOs, do they escape and go into the, wild? And I'm not, I'm saying not just a farm, a sustainable farm, what might happen in the surrounding non-farmed, just open space. There are concerns about that. The persistence of this gene after it's harvested means, does it get into other vegetation? Okay, so you harvest genetically modified potatoes. Okay, so what's left in the ground is the plant, right? They're not taking the plant. They want that plant to actually go back into the soil and plowed into the soil. Does that change something then in that soil, in the biodiversity of the soil? They need to be looking at that. Susceptibility of non-target organisms. So this is where we consider what's happening in terms of pests or insects that really are not pests. Okay, so is there a die-off of insects that are advantageous to the environment? Yes. Yes. Yeah, I do. Yes, I think that's my next one. No, it's probably not. But yes, one of the things about making plants resistant to pests, negative pests, right? Or, less desirable for insects, or making them more tolerant to herbicides really actually allows the farmer to increase the herbicide spraying. Okay, because what is a herbicide? It's there to kill vegetation. We only want it to kill certain vegetation. So if you have tomatoes or you have cucumbers and you have changed the genetic structure so that you can spray a herbicide to kill the weeds and it won't damage your plant and therefore won't damage your production, then you tend to use more. And is that problematic? Very probably. Depending again on the timelines with which they can spray and they cannot spray. And that is directly related, different times for different vegetation based on harvest. Okay. Increased, this is really what you were looking for, increased use in agriculture. Okay. So are they safe? That's really what you're here for. I think that for the most part, many of them are, but I think that for many, this jury is probably still out. Okay. So individual foods and their safety should be assessed. It has to be a case-by-case basis. It's not an all or nothing. So the statement from World Health Organization, again, we're talking World Health Organization, the GMO foods available on the international market have passed the safety assessments that are considered assessments globally. In addition, adequate post-market monitoring. This is a key point, that just because we have approved something for the market doesn't mean that there still shouldn't be follow-up to see what's happening with the food. So how are they regulated nationally? Well, I'm just taking from the World Health Organization. That's global. Nationally, it's going to be different in different countries. So it's going to vary. And basically, any country that has legislation in place, primarily on assessment risks for the consumer, they're looking at consumer health. Okay. Countries that generally have some type of regulation for GMO foods take into account health, not just of people, but they need to also focus on the health of the environment. If you don't have a healthy environment, we're not going to have healthy people. Okay. But the debate is going to go on. There's no easy answer here. There just isn't. Biotechnology is here. We're not going to make it disappear, but I think as consumers, we can continue to push for ultimate responsibility. Yes, you had another question? Well, if we're talking about agricultural, animal husbandry, yes, we're talking food and across the board. It really, what I mean is, encompasses all of that. Okay, so it's legislation about farm to table, anywhere along the way. Okay, so the issue is, with these large corporate farms, how does this affect our local farming? There is property rights, and this debate will go on, I think, and on and on. It's really the impact of the rights of the farmers and corporate farmers. Okay, so World Health Organization and the Farm and Agricultural Organization have considered potential problems that are going to go on. There is an unbalanced distribution of benefits and risks depending on where you are as a country in terms of how industrial you are you developing, or you're undeveloped. Okay, the problem is even more acute through the existence of what we call intellectual property rights. That's when you get into your legal battles, of having a farm that's having a sustainable farm that's next to a Monsanto corporate farm. I shouldn't always pick on Monsanto. There are others out there. Corporate farms are corporate, but we do tend to pick on, it's like picking on McDonald's, right, to represent all fast foods. The problem is even more acute, as I said, the intellectual property rights and patenting that places the advantage and strongholds of scientific and technical expertise. So I did put this link up if people want to write this down, or I can make sure that maybe Dama has it if people are interested. Okay, are people writing? I'll read it off. Yes, no? Okay. So it's who.int/entity, ENTITIY /food safety /biotech /meetings /en /G M as in Mary animal _ report NOV 03 _ EN dot, and it's a PDF. Okay, if you want that for further reading. Am I good to move? Okay. Where are GMO foods? They've been entering into the food that we eat since the 90s, and they're really in most of our foods. Although intellectually, or, I guess in a way, ideally, we kind of thought that this was for nutritional benefits or productivity. That's there. And in a way, if the farmers have better productivity, that does mean, whether you like GMOs or not, it does mean a better yield in terms of food at the market for the population. But actually, a lot of it has been focused on economic, in terms of making plants more resistant to pests and more tolerant to herbicides. Okay. So in the US, these are just the basic ones. We have soy, basically, is very predominant. You have cotton, canola, sugar beets, corn, Hawaiian papaya, zucchini, and yellow squash. So the papaya, the squashes, they're very easily bruised in transport. So a lot of the GMO here was to improve stability and kind of, shelf life or travel life for these products. So product examples. So you're going to find that your oils are made from GMO plants. The soy proteins that are in foods. The lecithin, cornstarch, corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup as well, right? Because corn is a GMO product. Okay. Do you want me to leave this up for a sec? You good? Okay. So this is an apple that started to hit the market in 2015. This is your non-browning apple. Okay. So they changed, certain genes to prevent the oxidation of the apple once you cut it. Some apples are much more susceptible to that. So really what they did is they changed the apple's production of polyphenol oxidase. So that means that when you cut it open, it keeps a nice white color and doesn't brown as much. Okay, so that's one of the newer products that are out there. Well, a lot of times, I think from a commercial standpoint, we used to use sodium bisulfate. Sodium bisulfate tends to have a high allergic reaction in some people. Some people actually get anaphylactic shock from that. Do you know what anaphylactic shock is? Okay, anaphylactic shock is when you have an upper respiratory response, allergic response, and the swelling in the airways, is certainly dangerous. Of course, when you start to feel you can't breathe, you become more anxious. The more anxious you become, the faster you swell. So these are individuals who really end up in the emergency room, and usually for the rest of their life have to keep an epinephrine pen. That doesn't mean it stops the allergic reaction. It means it buys you time to get to the emergency room. So even if you know somebody who uses an EpiPen when they have an allergic reaction, you still have to get them to the ER. That's a given. So it's really, probably more for commercial use, but it's also in the, for general market. When people cut apples and they want to use it in a salad or something, it for some people it means something. For some people it doesn't. Some people say, well, that's what an apple does. Turns a little brown when I cut it open. My understanding, it's really more for marketability. I mean, I could do a whole 3 credit course on food industry and how we perceive food, and I could include in there the amount of tons of food that get thrown out because it doesn't look picture perfect. But that's where we are in this country. I'm sorry, you had a question? On this one, I think it was within the same species. So I have to be honest, I don't know if they used apple to apple or maybe pear to apple. I don't know exactly, so I apologize. But the next one I know. Okay, so what's this? A fishy tomato? Okay, so this is a GMO tomato, and that's what we call a heritage tomato. A lot of times people go to the store or they go to the farmers markets and they want what we call heritage, meaning, non-GMO. So this was kind of interesting because I know that tomatoes have been over many years been tweaked to do several things. Was originally, get them to have a thicker skin, to travel to market better without bruising, to kind of fit into the little containers to protect them. Didn't necessarily improve the nutrition. Okay, so this was interesting because they actually, this is a goldfish in this image, but they use an Arctic fish gene. So Arctic fish, or what kind of fish? What do we classify them as? Do you know? No, just in general, Arctic. What is it? What does Arctic conjure up for you? You're going to go out in your bathing suit and sun? No, it's cold, right? So they take a genome from the Arctic fish that has to do with temperature tolerance. They inserted it into the tomato. Why would they do that? Right, so that you have actually you would have increased your potential growing season. And think of what's happening here just locally here. You have a cold night, a not so cold night. The change of seasons is a little bit stressful on agriculture. So now they have a tomato that can tolerate colder temperatures, which means a slightly longer growing season, not losing your crop to frost. And then the outcome is certainly more production for the farmer, but then theoretically more for the consumer. Does this fish gene cause allergy? To date, there is no evidence. It's a slice of the protein, of the DNA. So this I just thought was kind of an interesting image to kind of show you. Okay. So yeah, you had a question? No. Okay. Yeah. Has shrimp, right. It really depends on how their research turns out and whether that genome is going to have the same. Remember, they're taking a splice of the DNA. I know exactly what you're talking about. They're taking a splice of the DNA and they're inserting it into something that wouldn't necessarily have that. And if their research and data can actually prove that it is not causing an allergic reaction, I don't think that they're mandated to include that, because what you are allergic to in the shellfish is a larger strand of DNA. So does this little splice of genome actually cause the allergic reaction? They have to really check for that. And I don't have a clearer answer for you on that. I apologize. Okay. So how in this country do we know? Okay. In this country, we actually have the manufacturers, they don't have to claim that their product has been GMO, because if it's been approved by the USDA, the FDA and USDA to be on the market, they don't have to claim that. But if they want to say that they do not have GMO, they can't. This is really telling us as consumers, then you know that this product does not have genetically modified ingredients in it. So these are our go-to labels and identifying. So really what we're saying is, from a negative standpoint, we're not telling you we have GMOs, but definitely nobody can claim non-GMO without proving this. Okay. So I'm just going to wrap up with my references, but I do want to make a statement about this organization. I don't know, is anybody here, you seem to all have an interest in GMOs. Have you Googled GMO? Yes, we all have, out of curiosity, right? Has anybody come across this? No? A lot of times when I Google, this Institute for Responsible Technology pops up. The issue with Jeffrey Smith is he promotes himself as a public advocate, which is fine. Some of the stuff on his website, he really actually has gone back and he quotes things from the UN, World Health Organization. But a lot of his scientific correlation is very emotional. It's less really follows the scientific method. And some of his research is preliminary, what I'll call preliminary, and maybe some of it is anecdotal. So he's got a lot of emotional information up there. He's not exactly really accurate. I do think, though, his little offshoot where it gives pointers on how to find non-GMO foods and how to shop is informative. But to use this site for really anything that's going to give you important information about scientific research, this is not the site to go to. Okay, but the basic shopping tips, he really kind of uses some of the FDA and USDA information. Okay, so I'm just going to close with one question. There's a lot in the public information about probiotics. Does anybody use probiotics here, or know about them, or have any food that has probiotics? What do you know about probiotics? Yes. Right. Right. So our antibiotics are kind of broad spectrum. So probiotics are good. They are the gut bacteria that keep us healthy. When I teach, I do encourage students to think about how much fiber they have in their food, because fiber is the prebiotic. It actually helps your body's gut bacteria to reproduce, keeps it healthy. But one of the reasons why I bring this up is that some of those probiotics are actually copyrighted lactobacillus. So they are a GMO product, but I'm not saying that they are bad or they have a negative effect. I'm just trying to point out that that we really have to look at these, as the slide said, on an individual basis. Yeah. I think that's going to vary. I couldn't give an exact timeline, but let's say after a year that it's on the market, 6 months to a year, you should start seeing some broad spectrum. That would be my guess. That's not certainly a timeline that I could put on any product. But I do think that over time, depending, product gets approved, the research is given to the FDA based on the producer, that sometimes over time we do have to look at it again. Things aren't, I would say things are never absolutely 100%, that they can always come back to be looked at, but the generally regarded safe list is available on the government website. And those are some things that are the chemicals that we have that are questionable. But the government is supposed to always be looking, and as consumers, we can kind of ask them to do that. As consumers, we can kind of you know lobby for things. Not easy. It's not going to happen just because Professor Seid says, I want to blah blah blah. So, all right.